Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, the program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. This week's guest is artist Quincy Owens. He is a multimedia artist from Indianapolis, and he's also the partner of Owens and Crawley with Luke Crawley. And it's great to have you here, Quincy.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, thank you so much. I could talk about so much because you do so much. You know, he does custom work, commissions, he does corporate and residential work, but he is an artist and he does especially public art. And we could go about a lot of things, but please tell us a bit about your milestones as an artist.
Milestones. Started out with a humble beginning. Grew up in rural Indiana. Went to University of Indianapolis. Got my bachelor's degree in fine art there. Started making art professionally at a young age there as well. Another milestone would be when I got my first studio at the Harrison Center for the Arts. Mm-hmm. Another milestone would be when I was asked to become a teacher at Heron High School when it was opening.
Fabulous. Which
encouraged me to get my master's degree in teaching. All of this while not making light of meeting my wife, Nikki, and then we started having children. We have 5 beautiful children. Each one of them are definitely a milestone.
Awesome.
And an inspiration every day. Meeting Luke as a physics teacher at Heron High School, and then we started collaborating together, probably a quintessential milestone for where I am today as an artist, as well as where we both are. And then just continuing to move forward. Other milestones are meeting people who have become friends and employees, as well as fellow artists, like Aaron Dodd that works for us. He's incredible. We always have a great staff of influx of people who come in and carry us and our ideas forward, honestly, as well.
Well, you work in a lot of different mediums.
Too many.
Yeah, too many. But you've mentioned the word functional art, and just to kind of tie it in, I think that would be, because you're an extraordinary artist in my opinion, but I think you are. The work that you've done, from woods to acrylics to working with light, which you're really well known for in public art. Did you start off with any particular medium first, or did you work on all of them?
No, I started out, my dream back in the day when I was a kid and going to college was, I started out and my emphasis was in ceramics, actually. I wanted to do pottery. And then started having kids. I had a little ceramic studio set up in our garage, and like any, especially kid, I'd be making stuff, and I'd come back in the studio, and the kids will have touched everything and messed everything up. And
big
so
thumb and finger.
Exactly,
and
always,
that.
or it's like a dent in it, and I'm like, well, it's not how it's supposed to look. So that's when I really started shifting more towards painting as a young person, as a profession, I guess, or as a goal for a profession was abstract painting.
Yeah.
So my kids actually nudged me away from clay, unintentionally.
Clay into painting.
Yeah.
Now, you have a very interesting story about how you developed or started out as a painter. Can you tell us about that?
I was taking a contemporary painting class. I would have been probably 20 years old, I suppose, maybe 21 at the time. Christos Koutouris was a visiting professor, and like a lot of people in college, I was just playing, experimenting, exploring, really honestly lost, and copying other artists that I'd enjoyed, copying other students in the class who I'd admired, because I just wasn't able to land in my own space visually. So it got to a point late in the semester where I was failing the class horribly, so I just took all of my paints, all of my canvases, literally outside and started painting outside in the freezing cold weather.
Wow.
And just figuring out what I needed it to look like by myself. And I'd stumbled across this mono printing technique that I really liked, that I still employ on a pretty regular basis today. Back then, I don't know what it was, but there was something about painting but not using brushes, and being physical in the painting process, but also like some kind of a physical barrier. So like I wouldn't ever paint directly on the painting. I would paint on other things and then apply those things to the canvas. So it was an interesting way of kind of being in the process, but also removing myself from it at the same time. It's like there was a medium in between us.
Right.
And I really, really liked that about painting. I didn't want to be a painter with a brush. I wanted to find my own way. And I also think because I had started out with clay and sculpture, it made for a much more tactile experience.
I was going to say tactile.
Much more tactile experience,
Yeah.
which I just loved. And also with the mono printing process, I put my paint on typically on a piece of paper, push it on the canvas, and I would have some idea of what the outcome would be, but there's also that opportunity for chance.
Yes.
So as I would peel the paper away, I'd be like, oh, that's great. Or if I didn't like it, I could come back and play with it more if I wanted to. But I loved that element of surprise every time I'd peel away that piece of paper and see
Yeah.
what was revealed.
Because, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I'm thinking through that thinking process from what you just said, it's like in your mind, rather than this, like, you're this artist on stage having to come up with some brilliant painting that's going to go into a museum, all of a sudden the focus is on the process. And the like you said, tactile, the focus is really more on you're doing this and the feel and the smell and the whole how it turns out.
Oh, you hit it on the head, even like the smell of the paint, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
also...
a big part of it.
There are artists who do not artists, just people in general, since this is just about personalities, there are people who will not relinquish control in life, and they want to have as much order and structure as possible. I think that the way I live my life as well as create my work is I'm probably much more open to the possibilities that chance provides than a lot of people are in life.
Yeah. And so that would make sense for your appreciation or pursuit, or the right word would be for functional art. Because with functional art, it's not like you own it, like that's mine. It's like this is yours, and this is something that's sort of dynamic and living. And that makes for very fascinating art. And it's because the thing is, it will be dynamic, years later. And that's a fascinating process. Are there particular artists that you would consider, and you don't have to go through everything because you probably have thousands, but I mean in terms of very strong influences?
I
in your
would
art?
say, especially early on, any of the New York abstract expressionist school early on, and then that shifted naturally towards minimalism. So like de Kooning was always a love of mine, and then like Bryce Martin, Kenneth Noland, more of like the clean, straight edge artists. So I liked, I don't want to say the sloppy New York school artists, but I liked the more aggressive painters, but then I also liked the more intellectual geometric abstractionists. And then as I got older, I really intentionally, I don't want to say I don't look at other artists. I try not to be too overly influenced by other artists anymore. There are some easy ones, especially in the world of sculpture and in public art, like Olafur Eliasson's he's an amazing artist and does amazing work. I found that the older I've got, the less I want to look at specific artists and study their work.
Okay.
So as not to be overly influenced
Sure.
by their work, because
Yeah.
I've been doing this for decades, but I'm still looking for my voice, not accidentally wanting to step into somebody else's.
So you're doing your own songs now. You're not wanting to go back to the first record where you did greatest hits.
Trying, yeah.
Cover songs,
Yeah.
rather.
Yep.
And that makes sense. That really, really does. In the area of the light work, would that carry over on those influences, or is there other? Let me restate that. for your light artwork,
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing lights, are there particular artists that have influenced that you work with Luke on?
That's easy enough to answer because there are some, like, light art is, it's a subgenre of a subgenre of a subgenre in sculpture. So there aren't a lot, well, that's changing because of technology now.
Sure.
But early on, light wasn't even considered a medium for a long time because it wasn't available. But then there were early artists like Dan Flavin. It's easy to mention him as an easy inspiration. Gosh, now I'm
Well,
drawing.
neon lights weren't really, they've kind of
No.
become considered art now.
Yeah.
But when they first came out, they kind of were just sort of practical, functional art.
They really started out as function first because it was a signage industry.
Yeah.
But then I think even our light sculptures are large, especially our large outdoor public art sculptures. We're basically using the materials of the signage industry.
Yeah, so there's the continuity with that. And I really like how you use the metal. Here in Carmel, his piece that he has on public art is Sail, and which I think is extraordinary, and it's beautiful. The changing of the lights just keeps it so dynamic, and the beautiful color variation. I think it's just really, I could sit and watch that all night, and inside, because you
I was
can
gonna
go
say
inside of it.
Yeah, from inside or from outside.
From inside, it's just this beautiful work of art, and I like how the metal frames it. It's just really, it's truly beautiful, and that is extraordinary. And then you work on, is there anything you'd like, or there are the other influences on your other work with your exhibitions and that would be influences?
A lot of the influences I take from are honestly everyday things. There are people who say, "Oh, I'm stumbling from writer's block," or I'm struggling to come up with creative ideas. For over 20 years, I've never been able to say that. I always have more things that I want to make than I have time to make.
You are a production artist. When I've talked with you, it's like you're a productive man.
Yes.
If there's one word that would describe you, it would be productive.
Yeah. I like to stay busy. People really don't get it. I mean, some people, they go to work, they do their job, but then in their off time, they're just like diehard Colts fans, or whatever it is.
I know.
I'm just
They
like,
get on their hobbies and so
I'm not
forth.
picking on any of that, but
Sure.
my hobby is my passion, and my passion is
Sure.
my hobby. I wake up to do it every day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you're really living out what you're doing. It's not just work in the sweat sort of sensibility of that, which is just really fascinating. Recently, it was last year, you had a light exhibition at Newfields. That was last year.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that project?
Yes, that was a fun one. It was, as we're always growing and branching out, we're starting to do more things with projected light as well. So that piece is really nice. They gave us a few different areas on the property that we might want to display something, and then we chose the back of the Lily House just because it's a very unassuming spot. So we really wanted people to just... So let me preface a little bit, because it's in the wintertime as part of their winter lights.
Yes.
So depending on the weather, which is usually cold, people look forward to getting to the Lily House in the tour so that they can warm up. And then you walk through the Lily House and you come out the back through the basement level, warmed up. And then the idea was it's just that you are bathed in light as soon as you walk out those doors, in a place you wouldn't expect it. So, and that's actually... We're actually doing that again this year. I don't know if it will continue after this year, but we've agreed to set it up one more time this year. So
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
it's an exciting one.
I think that's a great project. So, well, for right now, we will leave at that point for Chapter 1. We will be back after a brief break for Chapter 2 in our interview with Quincy Owens. Hello and welcome back to Chapter 2 of the Omnibus Show in our interview with artist Quincy Owens. Well, Quincy, it's great having you on today, and you were talking about your multimedia experience and work that you've done, and just kind of more and more curious. I've got a question. I always love to learn from artists something new. And I think my first question on that would be, what is your favorite color? And we'll use it particularly in your light.
Okay. Well, you would have to
light
clarify
sculpture.
that because it would be different in the world of paint. So in the world of light, and I'll pick a favorite filter for light because we make a lot of our sculptures using translucent acrylics.
Yes.
My favorite filter for light is white because it actually allows every color to transmit through it. If you pick, so in the world of paints and pigments, the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow.
Yellow.
In the world of light, they're red, blue, and green. So if you were to push or attempt to push a green light through red or blue, at least as I say using our translucent filters, red and blue filters will make that green light appear black. Or what we like to say is it almost makes it look like if that panel were on a sculpture, that panel looks like it kind of shuts off. Like it almost turns off.
Oh, I see what you're
So
saying.
like when
yeah.
you've seen our sculpture
Yes.
in Carmel, if you're looking at it and you'll see like, you'll pay attention to like well, that's obviously a blue panel. But then if red or green light is internally on at that moment behind it, it will, I mean, there's ambient light issues, so it doesn't turn black, but it really will look like panels turn off
It's turned
from time
off.
to time.
Yeah. That's
Which it's
fascinating.
not turned off. It's just that color will not allow
That's the effect.
those colors to go. It's a rule of physics.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah. So, any of those who want to work with translucent filters, there's a lesson. There's lesson one for you. Yeah. No. That's really, really fascinating. And like I've said, you've done so many projects, and you've worked. You do a lot of installations, and you do a lot of corporate and commission work. You've done a lot of woodwork.
Starting to
And-
do even more and more, yeah.
Yeah, and can you tell us about a day in the life of Quincy on woodwork? And
Woodwork now for me would be, I had started out, this is years ago now, I'll digress a little bit. So when I grew up, my parents, we lived out in the country, heated our home predominantly with wood stoves. So if it was winter, that meant on the weekends, I was going out with my dad and cutting wood for heating the home.
yeah,
So as I got not a little bit older, a lot older, it made me realize like I wanted to take processes, I shouldn't say processes, I'll say memories from my childhood and things that I'd done from my childhood and bring those into my artistic practice. So I actually went back to my dad and I was like, hey, can we cut down a couple of trees, chop up the wood, and then make sculptures together? So it was a way of really paying my father an homage for, not only did we heat our home with wood back then, but he sold it, like it was part of his livelihood to make sure that I grew up and had what I'd like to think he thought was a good life. So it was really a way to go back to my dad and say thank you, and then honestly to connect with him in a way. Like he, not in a bad way, it's normal, you always hear oh, so-and-so wants to grow up and be an artist, and then there's always a parent who's like, well, how are you going to pay for your bills if you're an artist? So he was that dad for a short period of time, and so it was a way for me to bring him into what I do, and so he could see like that I'm lucky and fortunate that I'm able to pay my bills doing this now, and it was a really great way to work with him. So from doing those sculptural pieces with him, wood naturally lends itself to being used in furniture, so I've made quite a few dining room tables now, some chairs. Literally later today, I'm working on some custom circular wood mirrors for a client. This is like, it's wood, it's a material, it has its own materiality. It has a lot more headaches than a lot of people realize.
Sure.
It's got a lot of rules that you have to follow, just because I don't want to say it's a living thing, but as a priorly living thing, it just takes on the atmosphere. Whatever's happening in the air happens to it. So you
And there's also different types of wood that have different living effects.
Yes. So there are fun challenges with that material, just like every material.
Well, yeah, again, multimedia really suits you here with working on all of these different art and practical work. Now, another claim to fame that you're known for is your coasters.
Yeah.
And can you tell our audience a bit about that, how that started, and it continues to go on?
It really does, and I think I made my first coasters literally 10 years ago now, maybe 12 years, and the whole thing with that was, I don't want to say that artists are naturally hoarders, but we're definitely collectors of things.
Sure.
And so I'm always collecting things on my own, and then as people have gotten to know me as an artist, they're like, oh, I could take that to Goodwill or the trash or whatever, but
Sure.
I'll take that to Quincy instead. I had amassed just way too much sheet goods of lumber that I was literally tripping over. So I've made some rules for myself that if I sit on something for more than a couple of years, I figure out a use for it, or I do get rid of it.
Sure.
So I started just cutting all of these little squares out of the wood and making collages on them, and I was like, well, who wants to buy a little collage? That's silly. So then I bought some resin and I started putting a clear coat on them, and I called them coasters. So then they'd have this function that with a collage just sitting on your walls, I don't want to say it's a dead thing, but it's a piece of art. It's just there. It's static. So I started making coasters, and I put little slots on the back of them so you could have like art that hangs on your wall that you can take off your wall and then you can use. And then I started turning it into a playable game at art events and called it Coaster Pong. So now I've literally made thousands and thousands of them. I've done whole walls and people's homes with them.
You mean you've applied that to the wall, so they have this whole wall of
I just
coasters. Permanent.
Last one I just installed was a couple months ago. I think it was 244 coasters in a grid.
Wow.
On a couple's living room wall. Yeah.
Living wall. That's amazing. But it also tells a story. It's I always tell people when you want to learn about someone, and I mean this in a good way, and it can be negative too, but I mean, you go and you look at their books and their music collection and those type of things, and then you could say artwork too. The artwork I have at my home is usually artwork from people I know or places I've been. It's all personal.
Yeah.
There's a couple photographs from my photography, my favorite black and white and favorite color. So it's personal. If it's going to be on my wall, it's a personal.
Yep.
But it's fascinating that they have that. I mean, that must tell a whole story.
Well, and so for instance, with this couple, they also had 2 children old enough. So they came and they set themselves up with a number of I'm going to pick 30. She's going to pick 30. The kids are going to pick 30 each, and then we'll just continue to amass. And they didn't.
Sure.
The parents didn't curate what the kids picked either, so it was really fun to actually show up at their home with the grid after doing the math for the layout.
Wow.
So the kids were there and excited to see what mom and dad had picked, and then the mom and dad were like, "Oh, that one must have been picked by her because
it's a melted crayon."
Yeah. Oh, it was so fun to see. But even back to your point about. Not just artwork, but so we had a tiny house for years and years and years, and then we moved downtown to a big old house. And our dining room, for instance, when people come over, the artwork that we have in our dining room just tells a story, and people love to come over just to sit with the artwork that we have in our dining room. And my wife and I will literally sit for hours and still see new things in the artwork, or because of who we happen to be that day or our life circumstances, a piece of art will all of a sudden switch on a dime what its meaning is for us. And I just think that's just a underlying beauty of art that just, I hope everybody experiences, but I'm afraid that some people don't.
Sure. Well, it keeps the dynamic, and makes it like it's living, rather than I'm not a Platonist. It's rather than having a Platonic form that just sits there, and you know what I mean. Oh, that's a nice whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and so if it continuing, it has that dynamic life to it.
Yeah.
Those are some great stories. Thank you for
You're welcome.
sharing that. A little bit about your work with Luke in your public art. Can you tell our audience a bit about your public art? And we did mention Sail here in
Yep.
Carmel. And just like, what are some major pieces that are out there?
Let's see, major pieces that we've done that are out there. There's the light installation at Newfields. That'll be back this year. That's a nice one. We did a lovely light installation at a similar type place at Cincinnati Nature Center. That's also back up this year. It's more in tune with more of our geometric light sculptures.
Sure.
Other major projects we've done, we've been blessed by the city of Indianapolis and the Midwest, really. We have a number of things. We have a sculpture down on Mass Ave. We just did a really cool sculptural bench in Covington, and we're actually almost getting ready to start another project in Covington. Other big stuff that we've done that we're really proud of. Just earlier this year, we installed a sculpture in Laramie, Wyoming. A couple months later, we went and installed a sculpture in Denver, Colorado. Have 3 pieces that we really like in Washington, D.C. that we've done over the last few years. We're just kind of slowly getting sprinkled all over the place.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it really is.
That's really, really incredible. Now, we've talked about, we have mentioned Sail, and you have mentioned that, well, before this conversation, that you have a new art installation here in Carmel. And can you tell us a bit about that?
It's literally halfway installed. It's at the corner of 116th and Rangeline. It's a project in partnership with Buckingham Companies. They have a residential property that they're building there, and there's a parking garage inside the residential units that we also partnered with Midwest Architectural Solutions. They did, this will get a little bit too technical, but they're called purlins. They're just these straight slats that go vertically up the parking garage, and then we designed a layout of ginkgo leaves that are getting attached to those in a fairly muted palette, which is kind of a fun new thing for us. It's nice
Sure.
to not always
It's
make
kind of
everything...
change it up a bit.
Yeah, not to make everything bright and colorful, because the city of Carmel has a sister city in Japan. So we took the ginkgo leaf as a symbol of connection for the two cities.
That's very fun. Behind the City Hall, they actually have a Japanese garden, which is really beautiful. That's that's just a really beautiful connection.
It's a simple one, too. It's a very
it
humanist
really is.
connection. It's not anything that's wild and crazy out there. It's nothing
Yeah.
ethereal. It's not anything that the average person wouldn't get. A lot of times people go to an art museum and they see a contemporary art exhibit and they're like, I just don't get that.
But you're actualizing. You're that's really the best ideal of public art, where you're taking something that's very personal and human. You're connecting people, and it's a connection.
That's the goal.
That really, to me, that's more what I want in town. As someone who lives here, than just something that sits there, whatever it is. And so it's really, even if it sits there, it's got a connection to it, which I think is
Well, that was
really
a huge
great.
milestone for us with Sail. I was in India at the time when we were coming up with the design for it. And the city of Carmel literally said they wanted something monumental. I was like, okay. So Luke and I were FaceTiming or whatever back and forth, and I was like, it's got to be big. It's going to be on the Monon. People travel the Monon. I want people to be able to see it from blocks away. He's like, yeah. But then I want people to be surprised when they get there that this thing that is kind of a big, large beacon is actually something that also invites you in for this very intimate experience at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is what happens on the inside.
It does. It's like you're in it.
Yeah.
you're away. You're like in your own world.
It's your own little church.
Yeah.
For the time that
It
you're in it.
really is, because it has a kind of a cathedral feel to it with the light. No, that's wonderful. I like to go to look at that piece. I like to go at nighttime, which it really, especially when you have a good dark sky, it really sets off the color, and it's just really beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's fabulous. Also, you did a TED Talk.
I did.
And, but it wasn't just about art.
My theme, so the theme for everyone for that TED Talk was playground. And so someone from the TED Talk organization reached out to me and asked if I'd want to do that. And I was like, well, my whole life I try to live like it's on a playground.
Like on a playground.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
So I thought it was perfect. So that was basically what my speech was about, was walking through my life and how, I guess I should say I don't take myself too seriously, but I see the seriousness in the people that I've met throughout my life. I do work hard, but I like to make it more like play than work.
Sure.
So that worked out really well, and it worked out even better that I actually had made a playground the year before that. So I was like,
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, that just adds more. I don't even say milestones. It's just like this universe.
Yeah, I don't
of
recommend
projects.
everybody do a TED Talk, but
Gotcha.
it's on my resume now.
Yeah.
I survived.
Well, you've arrived. And in terms of a public figure, that sort of thing, because that's sort of the arrival of many people is doing a TED Talk. Projects coming up.
Lots of them. We already touched on the project here in Carmel that's nearing completion. Fun local stuff. We have another project coming up. A lot of our things, this is the unexciting part of being a public artist, is things get bigger and things need to have insurance waivers, which means we have to wait for engineers to approve all of our designs.
Yes.
Which is not sexy, but important. So we're in the engineering approval process for actually another project with Buckingham Companies up in northern Indianapolis, 96th and Meridian Street area, working with the city of Fishers at the Nickel Plate Trailhead to do a piece there.
Yeah.
I just did a piece for Flexware in Fishers that just got done a couple weeks ago, so that's new. We're finalists for a project in Lubbock, Texas, which if we do get that one, which we never know because we're finalists, I think we'll find out in a week or two, that would be our biggest project ever, budget-wise. We're nearing the end of engineering approvals for a project in Covington, Kentucky, for a piece that we're doing with the city there that'll be right across the river from downtown Cincinnati.
Will people be able to see that across the river?
Yep, that's part of the idea.
Okay.
Is just like Covington, as it's grown as a city, doesn't want to be seen so much as like that city across the river from Cincinnati.
Sure.
Because Covington has grown over the years. It's quite a lovely city to visit. We're finalists for 3 more projects in Washington, D.C. right now. Newfields is happening again. The piece at the Cincinnati Nature Center is happening again. In our world of fabrication, we're getting ready to install a large custom trellis at a client's home. It's
Amazing.
always something, yeah.
There's always something
Working with
happening.
lots of projects for designers, interior designers, landscape designers. Just because we've grown, we have the tools and we have the space and then hopefully the creativity to do all these things.
Well, that's incredible. That's like, you're like a construction art company.
It's we have checklists. Yeah, every day. That's most of what I do is manage my checklist.
And then another thing that is fascinating, because you had been an educator at Heron in the city, you have employees that work for you, and there's a sort of an educational process with that. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I find that fascinating, an artist with employees.
It's not every artist that gets to do that. So it's also, I do have to apologize first to my employees on a regular basis that I did not go to business school. Neither did Luke. We don't have management degrees. Luke doesn't even have an art degree. He has a teaching degree and a religion degree. So having to just work on the fly and manage people because we have jobs that we can't do the work ourselves. Some of them literally just because of the scale of the projects.
Sure.
We need the physical
You need the
help.
hands-on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's just the scope and scale. Sometimes now it's also the complexity. We have employees that specialize in computer skills and in digital design. That translates a lot of the time to also operating some of the digital-based machines like our CNC router and our plasma CNC router. And then there's somebody who's better at woodworking. There's somebody who might be better at physically hands-on sculpting things, welding, employees that need to be better at math because sometimes the math is super, super, super important in these jobs. And then holding everybody accountable, but also I don't ever like to call myself a boss. We might have employees, but I don't consider myself a boss.
Sure.
Luke doesn't either. So it's trying to keep...
almost more like contracting.
Yeah, or like also like a healthy dynamic. I don't want to call it like co-working, but I don't want to. I'm like at the end of the day, yeah, I guess like technically we're in charge, but it's
You're
really
not
a
the
creative
kind of person
space.
like I own you
No,
because I pay you.
it's a creative space where I mean everybody that works for us, like they're getting paid, but they're also they get the opportunity to learn through the jobs that they get to be a part of, and we also like to allow them to use the space and the tools for their own means as well. So it's really. It's not it's a job, but it's not a job.
It's hands-on, but it's like how many jobs do you hear about that are like that?
Yeah.
It's very unique. So you've provided a very unique atmosphere in which people can learn while they're hands-on. That's fascinating.
That's definitely, yeah, I still consider it art, but as I've gotten older and as I think as everybody gets older, you start to ask yourself these burning deep questions of like, well, why did I want to become an artist? And like, well, I realized I wanted to become an artist because it puts me in touch with people. It's like my introduction is through my artwork. But then I realize, was it really art? And then as I get older, it's like, I realize what I've really liked doing is creatively solving problems.
That's a great way to look at it, because that is probably the heart of work. Mm-hmm. When we say work or life work, what have you, even if you're an artist, I mean, I think that when you look at doing that, having the solution,
you have to come up with the right answer.
You have to come up with the right answer, and that's how you move forward.
Yep.
Fabulous. That's just really fascinating insight into your thinking and your process. And thank you for sharing with us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I'm really grateful. Well, that's it for this episode of the Omnibus Show with Quincy Owens. We would like to thank our sponsor, Hotel Carmichael, and we are shooting at Feinstein's. We look forward to being with you on our next episode of The Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.